call the roll in just 1 minute. We're just doing a little bit of musical chairs. Okay, so I did want to announce that our RTA, the Regional Transit Authority appointment, has changed. Is now Matt Webb, who is the Chief Operating Officer for the RTA. So I will now call the roll. Please say here when your name is called. Councilmember Ackerman. Here. Commissioner Boland. Here. Commissioner Felt. Here. Commissioner Fern. Commissioner Gordon.
Here.
Commissioner Hull.
Here.
Commissioner Nahidi.
Here.
Commissioner Parsons.
Here.
Commissioner Sims.
Here.
Commissioner Trudeau.
Here.
Commissioner Dolan.
Here.
Sergeant Bill Clark.
Here.
Commissioner Cooper.
Here.
Commissioner Lazarus.
Here.
And Commissioner Liu has informed us that he is unable to join, and Raymond Hess is here in place as the designee for Commissioner Liu. So Raymond Hess.
Here.
Sharing a microphone. Commissioner Margolis. Commissioner Webb. We do have a quorum.
Great, thank you. Thanks for coming through the art fair traffic. Be here. I'll take a motion to approve the agenda unless there's any corrections or additions.
So moved.
Seconded by Commissioner Shaw. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? We have an agenda. All right, then we have public commentary available, and you have 3 minutes, and Kayla's keeping track. If you want to come in and sign in and speak.
Hi, good evening. My name is Clark Charnetsky. I've got a little presentation for you. The middle of last month, Larry Krieg and I attended the SMART Advisory Council meeting. I'm a member of that group. And it met at the Dearborn train station. And we decided to take advantage of the time to take the bus service from, Detroit, Dearborn, and Detroit Metro Airport. At the beginning of this year, SMART instituted a new service on 3 routes, Gratiot, Woodward, and Michigan, called FAST. It's a limited stop. It runs from 5 a.m. till 1 a.m., 20 hours a day. And that's to accommodate people that have to work at odd hours. And so I'm showing you a little bit about that. This is the interior of the bus. It pretty much looks like a bus around here too. Nothing special about it. This is the McNamara terminal at Metro Airport, and we're looking from the bus stop for the fast bus, and also A-Ride is there too. Looking toward the center of the lower level of the parking garage. In the center is where you get to take an escalator or elevator up to go over to the McNamara terminal. And let's go back one. A lot of the buses that run through there are for the rental car market. And this is a little closer look. There's a shelter there. One thing I'd like to see them do is have an enclosed shelter. It was a beautiful day that we were there, but in the middle of January it probably isn't so pleasant. There's a heater in there, but it should be a little better. Here you can see the service that they offer. And there's a Michigan Flyer A-Ride bus coming in there. And this is in the center area, the ground transportation room, I guess you could call it, waiting room, and information too. And that's by the center of the parking garage on the McNamara terminal. We're now moving over to the other terminal, the north terminal, I believe they call it. And this is in the lower level of, this is kind of an extension out from the parking garage, the one they call Big Blue. And there you see a SMART bus, one of the more local ones, not the fast service. And looking toward the center. And there's a air ride bus coming in. People getting their bags. And this is what the fast bus looks like on the outside. They're all painted like this. And be nice if maybe in the future we have something like that operating from Ann Arbor, Washtenaw, Michigan Avenue to Merriman, and then into the terminal. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Is there anyone else who'd like to speak? All right, then public commentary is closed. Thank you. Next, we have approval of last month's minutes. Any corrections or additions to the minutes? They seemed a bit more thorough to me than they had been in the past. I appreciate that addition. So a motion to approve.
So moved.
All right, seconded by.
Seconded.
All right, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Howard is, no, that's somebody you're scratching your face, okay. Then we have approved minutes. Is our speaker here yet?
So Dr. Sayer from the University of Michigan Transportation Research Institute was joining us this evening. He's also flying back from China today and said he would be here subject to any travel delays. He may have experienced some travel delays. I haven't heard from him today, but he'd been in contact leading up to this, so I know he was planning to be here. And I think he was coming pretty straight from the airport. So I think we can move into we can skip over Dr. Sayer's presentation, move to the DDA
Yes.
presentation instead, and then come back if he's able to join us later in the meeting.
That sounds great.
So then we have Susan Pole of the DDA, and her team will be leading us through a discussion of the first Ashley and William Street projects. And there'll be a presentation, Q&A, and then opportunity for the commission to take action.
So thank you all for giving us time on your agenda today. Joining me is my colleague, Maura Thompson from the DDA, as well as two consultants that we're working with at Smith Group JJR, Oliver Kiley, and I've got Neil Bilodeau. We're going to walk through the first and Ashley and William projects in hopes that we might secure from you support for what we're doing. These three streets, along with Huron Street, which we came to speak to you about a couple months ago, are all being planned together. The DDA is working on 2 east-west streets, 2 north-south streets, and we're planning them together so that we can maximize the benefits of that shared planning, minimize any negative impacts. Today's projects, we're going to be looking at 2 pretty signature changes to downtown. We're looking at restoring two-way traffic on a pretty, well, we'll just talk about that first in Ashley, and then 2 of our first protected bikeways, one on First Street and one on William. These 4 projects, these 3 in particular tonight we're talking about, are being conducted by the DDA in support of our mission. Our mission is, of course, to encourage redevelopment downtown and also to strengthen downtown. We've recognized for many years that our streets and our sidewalks are a primary public space in downtown. We use them not just to traverse, but it's where we gather when we have celebrations, when we have our marches. It's where we come together as a community, and so we treat them with great preciousness because they are so vital to all of us, and they belong to all of us. And what we're imagining doesn't exist today, but could very well, which is to find new use on William, First, and Ashley beyond what we see today. So with that, I'm going to hand over to, are you going to, Oliver? Okay, I should have coordinated this ahead of time. I'm going to hand off to Oliver to start with. We're going to walk through a little bit about our People-Friendly Streets initiative, and then from that we'll get into the specifics. And again, thank you.
Great. Thank you, Susan. So I think we shared a few of these introductory slides probably last time we presented, but we just wanted to hit a couple of them again. As Susan mentioned, the DDA's People-Friendly Streets project includes a number of projects that are underway right now and in various stages of design and engineering. All of these projects are really guided by the 6 goals that you see up here. And we like to make note that these aren't in any particular order, with the exception of the first one around safety and comfort. And that's really focusing on safety and comfort for all users. So whether you're driving, walking, biking, riding the bus, sitting in a cafe, using the street side environment, that it's safe and comfortable for everybody. And so that's really at the forefront of our design decision-making process and the design that you'll see discussed more today. And I think, as you all are well aware of, from the safety standpoint, the city has adopted a Vision Zero initiative that City Council approved last year. And this is really saying that we're going to prioritize human life as the predominant driver for how we design our streets and our public rights-of-way, above other considerations, and that reducing fatalities and serious injuries is a major goal that the city has. So we're working and operating within that realm. So as Susan mentioned, there's a number of projects that have fallen under this People-Friendly Streets project. South University was completed mostly last year. Fifth and Detroit's under construction in the Carytown area. Huron Street is getting into the latter stages of the engineering and design work. And then First Ashley and William Street, those two projects were kind of right at a point between where we have some early conceptual ideas, and we'll be moving into more of the detailed design and engineering later in this year and through next year. So a couple of the key things, and one of the, as Susan mentioned, we'll be going to City Council next month for their support for a series of resolutions around these projects. And one of them that needs City Council approval, which is also why we're here asking for your support for a resolution as well, is that First and Ashley Street, historically they were two-way streets, and in the 60s they were converted into being a one-way street as part of a potential bypass around the downtown that would have included a lot of removals of structures, creation of new roads, trying to get traffic moving around town much quicker. And most of that plan was stopped by the community. There was a lot of pushback from that, with the exception of converting First and Ashley Street into a one-way street. And there's a lot of problems that stem from that, as Susan mentioned, trying to create an environment that's has a broader range of uses, that's more fun to walk on, that's more safe and comfortable feeling, is really critical to the DDA's mission. And if you think about those two streets, there's very limited amounts of that kind of feeling. There's a couple of blocks between the two of them that has that downtown kind of fun commercial feeling, and a lot of that has to do with the way one-way traffic encourages a lot of speeding, encourages a lot of fast motion through those areas. And so this is starting to be a shift in value as we look to go back to and restore these back to two-way operations. The good news is cities across the country have been doing this, have been going through these restoration processes. This was just a case study from South Bend that over the last couple of years, they've converted all of their downtown streets across the entire downtown that were one-way pairs back into two-way streets. They've done that with also being able to reduce the number of travel lanes, add protected bike facilities, create a much more safe and pleasant environment for all users. That also has created benefits even from a driving standpoint. A lot of times going back to kind of a two-way street grid helps restore the street grid. It makes it easier for people to get from point A to point B directly, and we'll talk about some of the implications of that in this project. I think another benefit for the two-way streets is this idea of redundancy in the street grid, which if anybody's driven on those corridors with Main Street closed right now for Art Fair, all the traffic, for instance, that's trying to go southbound today in the evening is all on First Street, and there's a lot of traffic there, and you'll have the opportunity to be able to split that across multiple roads in the future. So whether it's for events or emergencies, things like that, there's a lot of benefits to switching back to a two-way street. And then the other major component of these projects is the protected bike facility. And these are facilities that provide physical separation for cyclists from the roadway. Usually there's either lanes of parking, bollards, planter boxes, curbing, other kinds of things that provide that physical separation. And you probably have seen a lot of examples of these before. And the thing that's really key, though, is recognizing that for most communities, about 10% of the population falls into kind of an enthusiastic and confident cycling profile where people are comfortable either riding in the road or using conventional kinds of bike lanes right next to where there's travel lanes. And in many studies across the country that have looked at this and surveyed residents, they've also found that about 50% of the population falls into this interested but concerned category, where they'd like to bike more and bike to work and bike to locations, but they just don't feel safe and comfortable doing it in the infrastructure that's out there. And so as communities have started to build out networks of protected facilities, they're starting to see their big jumps in cycling ridership and cycling use in those communities. So that's what we want to try and move towards as part of this project. Couple things. So we've had 2 large week-long public workshops as part of this project. We had one back in March. Right. Yes, okay. Get my projects correct here. We had one back in March that was very well attended, and then most recently in the beginning of June, a little over a month ago, we had another week-long workshop, and we had many different points that were open to the public. We had a lot of meetings with property owners, business owners, other stakeholders, resident groups, all throughout that week. We met with the RIDE, with U of M, very extensive list of where we were able to actually roll out drawings with our plans, with our concepts, with our whole consultant and technical team there, with the DDA staff there, and we could kind of work through that design and figure out what's going to work and what might not work and where concerns are and how we can address them. It was a very interactive and back and forth session and very productive session. So there were over 100 attendees that participated in that, 2 public meetings, a lot of outreach that went into that. And overall, I would say we had very positive responses to the ideas that were being advanced through these projects, and we'll get into those in a little bit. But in terms of recognizing safety benefits of the 2-way restoration, there's broad support for that. Very broad support from the cycling community for protected bicycle facilities and some of the benefits that those would provide. 2 things that did come up too that were not really concerns, but things that we know we need to address were points around education and also maintenance. So once these are built, how are they going to be taken care of? That's a conversation that we're continuing to have with city staff. And then on the education piece, just recognizing that these protected facilities in particular are new to this community, are new to Ann Arbor. So what's the education around whether you're a cyclist or a driver around how you're supposed to work and use these facilities or move around them? So with that, we'll kind of jump into a little bit more of the nuts and bolts of the design for the First Ashley and William Street projects. So based on our traffic analysis and engineering analysis, our team's very comfortable with that restoration back to 2-way traffic. So there's still kind of details of that to be worked out, but that seems like those should be able to be overcome. And so that's good. And then also for the 2-way protected bike facility, we've looked at a range of options for how that would be designed. So is it a protected facility on either side of the road where it's kind of like a conventional bike lane that you protect? Is it a 2-way protected facility on one road? If so, which road does it go on, or is it split between 2 roads? We looked at all those different options and permutations. And the one that seems to have the most traction would be to do a protected bikeway on First Street on the east side of First Street. So today on most of the east side of First Street, there's just a normal conventional bike lane that's on that side of the road. So the good part about that is there's very little impact to loading or parking zones or things like that are other curbside uses, because it is a bike lane there today. So we're able to widen that out. And by and large, these projects are able to achieve all this and fit everything in without really moving the curbs a whole lot. So we're able to kind of stay within the existing road dimensions for the most part. And then on William Street, we would be on the north side of William Street. It provides a little better access and connectivity into the downtown destinations that people would be trying to either get to or might be coming from. I already talked to many of these. So the protected bike facilities on the east side. One other thing to note on this too is I think now about 6 or 7 months ago, we presented to the Transportation Commission around the tree line project and that trail coming in from the north at Argo. There is overlap between this project and the tree line trail too, and right at the north end where this terminates, where First Street dead ends into Kingsley, that's right where kind of phase one of the tree line trail comes down and ends. And the city already has an easement with Kingsley condominiums that's under construction there for the tree line trail. So this is a really nice way that we can feed and build right into that. This project will probably be implemented before the tree line, but it'll be right there and ready to make that connection happen. And then on William Street, as I mentioned, this would be on the north side of William Street. Generally, then parking and loading is maintained on the south side, so there is some loss of parking and loading space on the north side of William, and we'll get into the details of that a little bit later if there's questions. And then the other thing to note, where William Street goes to the west of First Street, and then where the protected bike lane goes south of William Street on First Street, you see where the dashed lines are there. That's where we're kind of transitioning, that's where we're transitioning into the residential environment. So the protected bike lane ends and we're switching to kind of a slow street. It's not officially a bike boulevard kind of design, but it's a design to help slow traffic down and create a more bike-friendly environment. We'll show what that looks like in a little bit. So just a couple examples. If you're referring back to this presentation at all later, this slide that has the kind of color-coded street segments with this A, B, C, D, those refer to the typical kinds of cross-section for the road design in these different areas, so we'll kind of walk through those briefly. This is the typical design. A lot of the more commercial streets in the downtown are about 40 to 42 feet curb to curb, so we're able to work within that space. And so this would be, for example, on First Street looking south. And so you can see where there's the 8-foot wide bikeway. That's where you have a 4-foot wide bike lane in either direction. The width of that buffer is anywhere from 3 to 4.5 or 5 feet wide, depending on how much wiggle room there is in the design. Those buffers can include things like planter boxes, kind of heavy concrete planter boxes and things like that, as you get closer to the intersections to provide some protection. Generally just two travel lanes, and then again that parking and loading lane that would be on the west side of the road. So that's an example of kind of how that is orchestrated. This was an example of more of the commercial streets, so portions of Ashley, for example, that don't have the protected bikeway on it. So the idea for that is to have a very similar cross-section as what was just constructed at South University. So we can actually go in and, as part of some of the streetscape improvement aspects of this project, we can do things like pull the curbs in a little bit to get wider sidewalk space. The sidewalks on a lot of Ashley Street are pretty narrow, so we can get more room to actually be able to get trees and other kinds of amenities outdoors or space for outdoor seating. Adding bump outs at a lot of the intersections so that the crosswalks are shorter for pedestrians and that pedestrians can be seen better around parked cars and things like that. So that's kind of the general design for the commercial streets. And then where we transition into the neighborhood areas, this was just an example down by Jefferson and First Street, kind of heading south and looking south. The idea here is that these residential streets, again, are going to be two-way now instead of one-way. And if you are familiar with those roads today, they're very wide. Portions of First Street only has parking on one side of the road, so you effectively end up with this like 26-foot wide travel lane that's just kind of a free-for-all today. So the good news is there's a lot of room out there. The curb-to-curb widths are basically the same as what they are throughout a lot of the other residential streets in the Old West Side. So if you go out to 2nd Street, 3rd Street, 4th Street, that same roughly 34 feet curb to curb dimension exists on First and Ashley as well, which is wide enough to accommodate parking on either side of the road and then also accommodate two-way travel. And it creates the situation where, as cars approach each other in a two-way condition, you kind of have to slow down and, to be able to scoot past each other. But that in and of itself is a major factor that helps slow down traffic and helps slow people down in that residential neighborhood. And then one of the other aspects of it that we're looking to implement on parts of the residential streets, not all of them, is what's called an advisory bike lane. And this is a treatment that's being, I guess the slide's not in here. That's a treatment that's being used in communities increasingly across the country where you basically, it becomes a way of starting to formalize this behavior where you have neighborhood streets without center lane markings. And as a driver, you tend to kind of drive basically in the middle of the road until another car comes towards you, and then you scoot around them. This advisory bike lane idea is you dash out on either side of that center lane of the road, markings for where bicycles can go to encourage the cyclist to stay a little bit off to the side, encourage drivers to stay more towards the middle, but it provides that flexibility for drivers to get around each other. So a couple kind of key things. So we spent a lot of time as part of this process as we develop these design ideas going back and looking at a variety of data sources. So looking at the safety data was a really critical piece of this. We looked at about 5 years worth of traffic crash incidences just within this study area, 650 crashes total within that 5-year period of time. 43 of those involved vulnerable users, so these are people generally not in a motor vehicle, so a bicyclist or a pedestrian or somebody on the sidewalk. And it shouldn't be too surprising, but is an unfortunate statistic, is that 91% of those vulnerable user crashes resulted in an injury of some kind. So it's really critical as we think about how we design roads that we help protect them, protect those vulnerable users. But even from a vehicle standpoint, over half of the vehicle-to-vehicle crashes in these corridors were a result of side swipes. So that's where you have 2 travel lanes in one direction as people kind of jockey to sort of get past each other or beat a light or just change lanes and don't see somebody in their blind spot, you get a side swipe crash. So hopefully by going back to one-way or two-way travel and just having one travel lane in each direction, you would greatly reduce chances or opportunities for those side swipes to occur. And so just a couple other examples. This really goes to a pedestrian comfort and safety aspect, but that idea of the double threat, where if you have 2 travel lanes in one direction, oftentimes you get one car that'll stop for somebody, but then the other car won't see the pedestrian through the car that stopped, and that creates a conflict point. And then also by building dedicated bike facilities, it starts to resolve the conflict of drivers yelling at cyclists to get out of the road and get on the sidewalk, pedestrians yelling at bikes, get off the sidewalk, get in the road. You're creating a dedicated space where cyclists can be, so that helps reduce conflicts between pedestrians and bicyclists in particular. So a couple of the other things that we've been modeling and looking at as part of this study that's really critical is around vehicle speeds. And so in the bottom right of this image, you can see the general kind of statistical chances of being killed as vehicle speeds go up. And so in particular, that jump from 20 to 30 miles an hour is a huge increase in the chances of being killed. And so a lot of these projects are, and what we're seeing through our traffic analysis is that the average vehicle speeds will go down across the length of the corridor. We did counts to actually collect those vehicle speeds, what they are today. The one on the left, this was on First Street, just north of Ann. And so there's about 6,000, 6,500 cars a day along that block, and 2,500 cars are going over 40 miles, or sorry, not over 40, but we're going over the speed limit. So almost half of the traffic along these roads is going over the speed limit. And then within this daily period, about 100 vehicles are actually going over 40 miles an hour along this corridor. So people are really ripping down this corridor. So if we can start to slow down and moderate the speed of traffic as part of this implementation, we think that would be really great from a safety standpoint. Just a couple other quick points. We've also looked at going back to this idea around how do we accommodate a broader range of cycling and bicycle users. There's an analysis process called a level of stress analysis, where it basically separates those bicycle users into 4 different categories of how stress tolerant they are to different roadway conditions. So, you know, how much separation is there between biking and vehicles? What's the vehicle speed? How many travel lanes are next to the roadway? What are the vehicle volumes? All those kinds of things. So you can think of a level of stress 1 being people maybe biking with kids or kids that are learning how to bike and cycling around. Level of stress 2 might be the adults that are in that interested but concerned category, right? How do we start to get them feeling more comfortable for cycling? And then level of stress 3 and 4 tend to be that 10% of the population that's comfortable biking in facilities as they are today. So what you see on the left was a quick analysis, just looking at the the green and orange for the first Ashley and William Street corridors, and then the solid blue lines are the existing bike lanes that are kind of feeding into that network. And the thing that's really interesting about that today, if you're coming in, for instance, from the west side of town on Miller or Liberty, those are these angled roads that are coming in, you have no way of getting from there through downtown and either to a destination there or to, say, the protected or the existing bike lanes on 5th or Division or Packard without going into kind of a higher stress, stress level 3 or 4 kind of environment. And so what we can do, what you see on the right, shows this darker green set of lines for where that protected facility is being built. So based again on looking back at that criteria around vehicle volumes and vehicle speeds and what those are projected to be, you can see that creates links that are much lower stress for people even through that urban environment. So the bicycle infrastructure that you have today actually gets a lot better connected even for people that are comfortable biking around, because now they have a way in the lower stress way to get through town, as well as opening up a lot of opportunity for people that aren't comfortable cycling today. So just some of the specific safety things. I'm not going to read through all of these, but generally a lot of different intervention strategies have what's called a crash modification factor. That basically means what's based on evidence of where these have been, changes have happened and crash rates have been monitored. What are the percentage reductions that are typically seen as different interventions are implemented? So for instance, adding bump outs at corners to help daylight where pedestrians are waiting to cross the street typically has a 33% reduction in crashes and a 40% increase in vehicles actually yielding for pedestrians at crosswalks and at crossings. So things like that, there's a variety of kind of statistical measures that are attached to these different design elements in the plan. And then we also looked at those travel time impacts through our traffic analysis. And so this was looking at First Street. This is just a very small sampling of that information, but was looking at just First Street, Ashley Street, and William Street in either the morning rush hour or the evening rush hour. And a couple things are really interesting about this. One is that as we modeled out the traffic flows, we found that about 85% of the vehicle trips going through the study corridor are kind of localized trips where they may just be going for a block or two along the corridor. And what we found is that travel times for those users actually went down a little bit, and that's as a consequence of them being two-way roads. People can get directly to where they want to go. They don't have to circle around the block and go through 2 or 3 additional intersections to get where they want to go. When we looked at the remainder of the 15% of the trips that are actually going the whole length of one of these corridors, so for example, in an evening rush hour going from Kingsley Street on First all the way down to, say, Madison, where our study boundary ends, only about 15% of the trips are actually going the full length. And worst case scenario that was modeled, there was about a 72-second increase in travel time. And that's a difference of going from about 2.5 minutes to a little over 3.5 minutes in travel time. So it's a relatively minor impact in speed along the corridor. So just a few other kind of elements, I've mentioned a couple of these, but generally we're working within the existing curb-to-curb dimensions on these projects. There's a few blocks where we are changing the curb, either because we need more space to build these facilities or because there's an opportunity to improve some of the streetscape environment as part of that. Generally looking to add bump outs wherever we can. We've been having a lot of conversations with business owners, property owners along these streets to talk about their loading zones and their curbside uses. So we're reconfiguring parking. We're able to actually pick up parking in some areas. We're able to either expand or kind of optimize use of loading zones in a lot of spaces. So that's been a really productive thing for us to be able to look at as part of this. There's some intersections that we're looking at, improvements for those. And then other elements of the project, there's water main upsizings, stormwater opportunities with some of the Allen Creek funding to help actually weave stormwater management into these projects. we're looking into the road resurfacing after, you know, the construction's done, and then, as I mentioned, some of that streetscape enhancement. So kind of where we are in this general process, we have kind of a schematic layout that's starting to come together that hasn't been fully fleshed out yet. Our survey is wrapping up, so we're able to tie in our actual survey with our design. And so the key thing is that in next month, in August, there'll be a series of resolutions going to City Council around bonding for these projects, as well as approval for the two-way restoration on First and Ashley. And so once that hopefully gets approved, we'll be able to move into our detailed design and engineering phase based on what we just presented to you today in concept. So I don't know if anybody has anything to add. I think that was it for that. So we're happy to answer questions. We have other materials too that we can pull up if we have a particular question.
Well, this isn't a question, this is a comment. And
Sure.
I really want to thank you, Oliver and Susan. A lot of us have been waiting years to see protected bike lanes in Ann Arbor.
Great,
So I didn't realize the DDA was going to come up with it. Bless your hearts.
great, well, thank you.
So, I'm just wondering one thing. I noticed
Sure.
like you had the protected bike lanes on the north side of William Street. What will happen to the bus stops that are currently on William Street there? Like, I'm wondering, like.
Yep, so I can answer that. We've been meeting with folks from the RIDE throughout this process to talk about those exact things. They have there's a couple bus stops kind of closer towards State Street that are on the north side that we've figured out some options where they can move them onto a cross street as it comes in towards William and turns off. So some of those bus stop locations may move about a block or so in distance. So the RIDE seems pretty comfortable with that, and we can provide other detail about that as it kind of shakes out. The other question from the RIDE that came up too, they do a lot of staging for some of their buses on William Street, right across from the old Y lot. So we've had conversations with them about moving some of that staging, perhaps along the parking garage on 4th Ave, to kind of make space for the bikeway there.
Yeah, and also, what happens if somebody's being dropped off, like, right there? Like, I'm wondering how that should be handled, because I know that people are going to, like, if you're taking an Uber or something, or just having a friend drop you off, if you're being dropped off on that side, well.
Yeah, we wouldn't want to have, there wouldn't be a lot of opportunity for drop-off on that north side, so you would have to either go to, the nearest cross street and corner and turn there, or drop somebody off, on the other side of the street and have them use the crosswalk to get back across. There will be breaks, of course, in that for driveways and curb cuts and things like that. I mean, there is the need to accommodate that, so that's not going to be like an impenetrable wall, but there'll be space for, if you need to get into a driveway. And those could certainly be used if you're dropping somebody off at that address. So, yep.
Conceptually, I love this, and thank you so much for pushing things in this direction. I hope this is just the start of moving forward towards these sort of streets. Two really nitpicky sort of problem areas just to keep in mind. The railroad crossing on First is really difficult for cyclists, so we're going to have to figure that out. And then I'm also a little concerned about the width, especially coming down the Williams Hill for cyclists, and the speed that might be generated. So I don't know if there's ways, I know that in the Netherlands, the more people and bikes are on a system, the wider it gets to be type of thing. Yeah. So you might be able to squeeze that in. And then this is more probably for the people on this side of the table. Just a reminder that First, if it's a protected cycle track south of, well, where's it going to end?
The protected cycle track would end at William on First Street.
Okay, so it ends at William. If you connect William down to Madison, you've connected a bicycle route that is a zigzag flat route that can get you into Lower Burns Park, that can get you down to Lucky's Market, that can get you down to all sorts of residential options. So if there's a way to do wayfinding signs, maybe we could start talking about those sort of ideas to make the grid connected, not just on paper, but Yeah, I love it. I love it. That's great.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for all the work you guys have done.
Sure.
It looks really interesting, and I think there's a lot of excitement here, and it sounds like in the general community output, which is really good to hear. One thing you touched on was the overlap with the tree line, and I was just curious because I wasn't sure what I'm not sure how far down the road this has kind of gotten in thinking. But I think my understanding up until now has been that this would essentially sort of be the tree line downtown, and that there wouldn't necessarily, that there may be less of a priority to build out the actual, because when you originally designed, when you came and presented about the tree line before, there was a very detailed block by block, potential, and my understanding was that this was going to be essentially this would be the potential tree line for that stretch north to south.
Sure.
But I wasn't sure like how much that's really set in stone right now.
So just if I can just take a minute to talk on that. So the tree line master plan had identified First and Ashley as kind of coordinating projects, and a lot of those corridors also as kind of near-term opportunities or near-term routes for the tree line. So you can see in the image that's on, I think that's on your screens too, north is to the right in this case. So that big heavy blue line on First Street is where it would tie into the tree line going north, north of Kingsley. I think, so there's overlap along that first block coming south of Kingsley. So we have some different ideas already kind of generated around how we can actually make that, build a permanent part of the tree line even on First Street as it comes down. The block across from Liberty Lofts, it was always proposed as an on-street kind of section of the tree line. And that could also include going into some of that parking lot as well. So we have an opportunity to build out kind of the main section of the tree line even as part of these projects and making that connection happen. So I think there's a lot of really good synergies here between these two. I think long-term, my sense is that it's going to take a while, and there's some big infrastructure pieces that need to happen on that north section of the tree line. So with that coming online and the focus going on that northern section as kind of the phase one of the tree line, this will work really well to provide a connection kind of near term, as well as just being a lasting improvement to the bicycling infrastructure in town. But I think, ultimately long-term, it'd be nice to see both happen, I think.
And I appreciate you bringing up this slide because I think it answers it. It might have, if it was labeled in this presentation you just gave, I might have missed it. But
no, it wasn't.
I see the parallel path. The fact that it's going to West Park and it's labeled as the underpass. I can see now like you said, that they're complementary opportunities as opposed to one being just the thing to do and then the other sort of being. I can see now where both are useful. So thank you.
Sure, you're welcome.
Yeah.
I'll echo everybody in saying thank you all for all the work you've done on this. I've been to a few of the public meetings, and it shows like there's a lot to balance here and a lot of opportunities. So overall, I think this is a fantastic first step, and then a small piece of what's hopefully a much larger connected bit of bicycling infrastructure. My biggest question on the two-way conversion is there's a lot of positive safety benefits. I'm worried about the increased number of turning movements at intersections, and I'm wondering whether you think we're trading away sort of like more potential turning conflicts for all of the other benefits, or whether you think there's ways to manage some of that in the design.
Sure. I think, that is true from a vehicle standpoint. It's nice because increasing the number of turning options gives people more ways of going. So I think the main, one of the things that we're starting to look at is, is there an opportunity as some of these roads go from two-way or 2 lanes in one direction down to 1 lane in each direction, along with 1 lane in each direction on the cross streets. Some of these roads, you might be able to slow them down a lot by turning them back into 4-way stops. That's something that we have to look at. And obviously, you don't want to, create too many new problems from that. But that can be a way of forcing cars to slow down and actually come to a stop, as opposed to, having a lot more turning conflicts going through, signalized intersections, or somebody has a clear to go through and they're going 30 miles an hour and, have to stop suddenly. So that's something that we're looking at. But so
Is no turn on red on the table on any of these intersections?
we have. That's, I think, we haven't quite got to that level yet. I think that's a case-by-case thing, and we need to work with kind of the city staff and go back and, look at the traffic analysis to see where that could work. That's certainly an option. Where the protected bike facility is, both the cross streets and the street that it's on, those are generally, it's required usually that those be no turn on red, so that you're not having cars turning across bicycle
Right.
traffic where people might not be accustomed to looking for it. So that is something that would be part of the protected bike facility, the roads that have that, which covers William Street and a lot of First. And then we didn't really talk about it today. We talked about it last time we presented on the Huron Street project. We're looking at adding a lot of no turn on red to a lot of the Huron Street corridor too, just trying to get cars to stop back further and not, come to a stop right in the crosswalks and things like that, so.
Cool. And then my last question is, did you, with the commercial streets, it's a little disappointing to see not really any cycling infrastructure other than just necking down the intersections, which I think will help. But I understand the purpose of those streets. But given that they're sort of destination streets and not through streets, if they're commercial streets, did you look at designs like raised crosswalks or that kind of thing to signal like we're slowing down, this is more of a shared space, so it's not a place people will shoot through?
Yeah, that's a great idea. I mean, that suggestion has come up, and so I think that's something that we could certainly look at adding into the design. It's not really on or off the table at this point, but it's in the toolbox that we can look at, so.
Great, yeah, thanks.
Absolutely, thank you.
So I have a couple of comments, one of which is that the no turn on red was a recommendation of the Pedestrian Safety and Access Task Force for all of downtown.
Okay,
So we hope that you continue to look at that.
great. Okay.
And I think that the crash statistics are pretty stunning. And as part of the educational piece, certainly should be emphasized.
Yep.
And I also have added a lot in my thoughts about evaluation. And since this is so new, and people in Ann Arbor are going to go, it's great to present it as a learning opportunity, something that will be evaluated, something that we're trying out. It is paint, and I suspect it will be wildly successful. But people can sometimes accept change more readily if it's the idea that you'll get a chance to continuously let us know what you think.
Yep.
But I think in general, it's the introduction that certainly the bicycling community hopes will spread. And so it's a great, exciting opportunity to do that. And just my last point is that my experience biking up William Street is, before I got an e-bike, people passed me. And so you actually need more passing room for bikes to pass bikes because it's such a steep hill going from going up that hill to Main Street.
Yep.
And so I hope that opportunity is there too as well.
Yeah, just since that came up, if I can just take a minute to answer that, because two people brought it up. The good news on that section of the road today, it's really a lot wider than it needs to be, the road. And so with just one travel lane, we can actually get like a 7 or 8 foot wide uphill kind of climbing lane on the bike lane side. So we got a lot more wiggle room in there to either provide more width or to provide we've looked at an option too, or maybe the buffer portion is a lot wider, but the protection, whether it's planters or posts or closer to the vehicle lane side, so that you have kind of a wide shoulder almost built in to the bike lane so that people can get around each other as you go uphill. So, yep, we've been looking at that exact spot.
Other comments or questions? We're about out of time, so. All right.
Great.
Thank you very much. We have a resolution
Thank you.
of support that was in your packet. And so if somebody wants to move that, second it, we can have some discussion if necessary.
So moved.
Okay, seconded by,
Robert will second it.
all right. So is there any discussion about the resolution? You like it as is? All right, then we can vote if you're ready. Those in favor saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Great, we're supporting the work. Thank you.
Go get 'em.
And how are we doing with,
So I have an update. I did receive an email yesterday from Dr. Sayer. It unfortunately was filtered to my spam folder. Maybe it was sent while he was in China, I'm not sure. But he is ill and is not able to make it tonight. He caught a cold while he was traveling. So we'll work with Dr. Sayer on rescheduling and find another time that he can give us an update about connected transportation.
great.
And in the meantime, we can keep moving through the agenda.
All right. Yeah, part of that idea was to have him here because Ann Arbor is pretty much the premier place in the whole world for connected transportation. And it seemed like we should stay on top of that information. So that'll be great to do later on. Okay, then we have some information from Erica Briggs next.
Madam Chair, I'd like to,
Yes.
if I could intercede. Over the last couple of years, we've introduced the practice of having executive policy advisors. We now will have 3 of them. The role of the executive policy advisor really, there are people among us who have the expertise, the passion, and the commitment to work with the senior staff in the city to advance community values. The first that we put in place was an executive policy advisor for economic development, and through Ms. Sally Peterson's efforts, we've been able to unlock a lot of doors, including the potential redevelopment of the DT Mishkan site. The second executive advisor who came to join us was John Mirsky, who sits on both the environmental and energy commissions. John is a retired engineer who has helped us with things related to energy, solid waste, as well as performance measures, and holds us accountable for doing the things that we say we're going to do. So the third that we'd like to introduce is an executive policy advisor for neighborhood engagement and transportation safety. That is a very impressive title that comes with a business card and no money. The goal really is to help formulate and pursue strategies to develop a strong network of neighborhood associations and civic groups that are empowered to engage with city staff in matters really related to transportation safety and neighborhood quality of life. You know, as administrators in the city, well-organized, well-structured, and well-disciplined neighborhood associations can be our best ally, especially as we struggle with community engagement, where there are disagreements among neighbors in an area. The goal for this particular executive policy advisor is to work with the city administrator to move several policy priorities forward for neighborhood engagement and transportation safety. In particular, to help form and conduct a Vision Zero task force to assist in the development and review of processes that advance or impede development and construction of safe and people-friendly streets, to expand the urban trail network, to coordinate with city staff, help us overcome sometimes the silos that exist, to make sure that we are engaged with our neighborhoods, and then to attend conferences and meetings, bring back best ideas, and to be fearless in the execution of those throughout the city. So I am pleased with that introduction to introduce Erica Briggs as our Executive Policy Advisor for Neighborhood Engagement and Transportation Safety. Erica is the Executive Director of Scenic Michigan. She chairs the Washtenaw Biking and Walking Coalition, and she serves on the Ann Arbor Planning Commission. She is currently wrapping up her PhD studies at Michigan State, where she's focused on regional transportation policy and planning. She's also worked in the past as the Get Downtown Program Director, and she's worked as a project manager for the Walking and Biking Coalition on a community-wide education campaign for the pedestrian crossing ordinance. She is also involved with the Safe Routes to School programming at Clegg Middle School and has served on many local and state boards and commissions, including the League of Michigan Cyclists, the Ann Arbor Energy Commission, and the Zoning Board of Appeals. I am excited that she has decided to dedicate some of her time and much of her talent to help us become a more connected city and to become the leading cycling city in the Midwest. So I'm pleased to introduce Erica Briggs.
Thank you.
So it's nice to be here. This is definitely my sort of crowd. Definitely a transportation nerd and volunteer junkie, clearly. So, you know, we'll be exploring how to move this forward and, you know, how to sort of best use my time so that I'm really supporting the great work that's happening here at the city already. Obviously, there's super exciting stuff happening at the DDA. And I think that this sort of new position also helps me sort of bridge the gap that I'm seeing also between planning and transportation and sort of address that real need for neighborhood engagement that we encourage and appreciate and sort of develop in a positive manner. So I think there's a lot of opportunity to see where, you know, how we can help build the community. So excited to be doing this and working with all of you. And then there's a resolution before you tonight that tries to put together a little more clarification around Vision Zero, moving forward the recommendations of the Speed Reduction Committee, putting some of those recommendations into a resolution, and the hope is that just sort of speeding up that process of the work that you've already been doing and helping to clarify how we can move forward. So hopefully you guys can discuss and debate that, and something similar can hopefully perhaps move on to council. So I'll let you, let me know if you have any questions, but otherwise I'll just be sitting down.
Thank you, and congratulations. So we'd like to move into the resolution. Again, I'd like to go ahead and have a motion and second before we have discussion. Okay. All right. Discussion. Yeah.
So I had a question. There are these 7 recommendations put forth by the Speed Reduction Committee, and just 2 of them made it into the resolution, and so I wondered how that evolved.
So, you want to?
I imagine Erica can speak to that.
Okay.
I think maybe it was an attempt to not throw too much into this first resolution. I certainly see that, you know, if it was just a desire to move forward, you know, to build upon that, I think that there's a lot of opportunity. I think all of the recommendations within that deserve to be moved forward. Speed, I think, is one of the most pressing issues that the city isn't necessarily addressing yet, and there's not much language around it. And so I think this provides a little bit of guidance on that aspect.
Okay. Yeah.
I think also in conversations with staff, it's clear that a lot of work is underway on all 7 aspects. I think we can do a better job of being transparent on tracking that effort, so we can see where we're falling short and where more resources may need to be dedicated. But the 2 that are called out here specifically, I think, are the ones where we need to take a larger leap in next step more immediately. Just, I guess, by way of an example, the next agenda item will be on the traffic calming program and its amendments. Yeah, I'm excited to see these 2 certainly moving forward.
Any other comments or questions? But as the one of the people who was on the Pedestrian Safety and Access Task Force when I got it early copy of this resolution, I just got so excited. It was really thrilling to see that we've gotten to this point. And so I'm really happy that we get to vote on it tonight. Any other comments or questions about it?
I'll just say that I'm thrilled by it, 100% support it, and want to thank Erica and Howard for working together to put it together. I think it's very well written and very clear. I think it's a great step forward.
Are we ready to vote?
I'm sorry, actually, if I could
Okay.
ask one more question.
Yes.
Within the resolved clauses, there's direction to the city administrator. Is this as much direction as you need to form these task force, or will you look for follow-up action from council as well?
I think there's plenty of direction in the resolve clauses.
Perfect.
Thank you.
All right. Anyone else? All right, then all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Great.
That's good.
Thank you very much.
Really exciting. And just a point of clarification, any sort of credit to clarity and simplicity should go to Kayla and other staff members who cleaned up this resolution greatly. So it looks good. Thanks.
They're so good at that. Okay, then we're going to talk about the traffic calming task force. And so I'll turn it over to Bradley to do that. And then we also have 2 members to appoint to the task force. And we'll just do a little brief introduction of them after Brad.
Yeah, so the traffic calming task force met with staff just this morning, again, for an hour and a half. And I want to say that I think it was one of our personally, one of my more productive meetings with staff. Like, everybody just felt like they were clicking. Everybody, like, the conversations were great. You know, there was a very nice feeling in the room, but there was also a lot of knowledge being shared and a lot of ways to step forward. That's our second meeting. We have one more next week, and I'm cautiously optimistic that we're going to have things ironed out. I don't know. I'm looking at Zach. He was in the room too. Yeah, I think we're moving forward. I don't know. Kayla's notes from last time were very clear on what we discussed, and I think she's going to provide the commission with notes from today. So if you want to look at the details and talk to me more about it, that's totally fine. I don't know if Zach had.
Yeah, I think, majority of the points of divergence from the first meeting between, I wasn't able to attend the first meeting, but between the task force and staff were areas where I think there's some consensus now that maybe they're not within the scope of this program, but there's certainly things we want to tackle perhaps as a commission later on. But is that fair to say? So while I think we're getting more comfortable with the product, that's not to say that this hasn't been, inspiring and finding a lot more work for us to do.
Yeah, we have more future work.
I would expect so. All right. So there we have our task force, and both Patti and Jared have agreed to participate, but we didn't get a chance to appoint them ahead of time. And so we wanted to do that now. And I'm guessing that this is Jared in the audience. If you want to take about one or 2 minutes so we have a little short bio, but.
Sure. I'm kind of used to writing those bios in third person, so the first person was a little different. But basically, just give you a little bit of background for those I know some of you on the commission. But I've lived twice, if you will, in Ann Arbor. Once in the early 90s as a student, and my family and I moved, we were away for a while. I lived in New York City for 17 years. And then after marrying my wife and having our daughter, we moved back here about 6 years ago. Since then, I've been involved with a couple of projects in our neighborhood. I live over on Yellowstone Drive in the northeast Ann Arbor. And basically got involved with the Blewett traffic calming initiative that's going on right now. Neighbors that have had handwritten signs out or yelling at people to slow down as they go around a curve. I would again like to publicly thank Mr. Lazarus for his help when I approached council last year on getting a couple of suggestive road signs on that curve. And then also helped the community organize the petition for the traffic calming procedure that's going on. Like I said, I live here with my wife. I have an 8-year-old daughter who attends Thurston Elementary right now. So as I'm sure most of you know, the traffic calming there, the bump outs on Prairie, the safe routes to school issues are very big in that area right now. And she's just about at that age where I'm thinking, is it, okay, when do I let her walk to school by herself and stay safe, you know? So it's important things for me as a father, as a resident in that area. Also having the background of living in a large city with transportation issues in New York City for 17 years and taking public transportation for most of that time, and on the other side of the coin, being a family now that actually does need 2 cars. So being able to see the issues from both sides of motorized and non-motorized thoroughfares, and seeing what works and what doesn't work. So I like to bring that to the table, and I'm, as Bradley said, I think we've been having very good sessions so far. So I'm enjoying this. I'm hoping that we can get some good recommendations.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jared.
The other person who's interested in the task force is Patti Smith. And I asked Robert to say it.
Patti Smith is probably known by most people here and most other people in Ann Arbor. I heard her described as a force of nature. At any rate, her moniker is Teacher Patti, and she will bring that public school area experience. She works at Ypsilanti right now, to the table, and I think it's an important voice to be heard in any kind of traffic calming setting. She likes the idea of bicycling, but she doesn't currently have a bike. We need to fix that. She lives across the street from me, so I know these things. But she's very bright. She's very energetic. I'm sure she'll bring wonderful things to the subcommittee.
Right. So if it's okay with the commission, we can take a motion to appoint both of these people at the same time. Is there any objection to that process? All right, then I'll take that motion.
Parsons.
Oh, it's motion by 3 people. I saw Brad first. Seconded by?
I'll second.
Okay. Great. Any other discussion about that? Hopefully we'll do this in the proper order next time we have a committee. All right, then let's vote. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Great. Congratulations, Jared, and to Patti, who's at another different meeting tonight, so. Good. The next item is a worksheet that Kayla and I developed just to make the work of committees a little bit clearer. 'Cause I think that many people are not used to writing proposals for city council, and we want them to like our proposals a lot. And so we put this together just to provide a little guidance, and I'm sorry that you got it a little bit late, but it's nice and brief, to the point, which is how proposals to city council should also be, because they get a lot of paper. And so we mostly wanted to have this as a document for our committees to work with. And hopefully it will help the communication process between commissions and the city council in general. So we don't have to adopt it or accept it in any particular way, but if there's anything that we missed or anything that you want to question, then we have a little bit of time to do that. I don't know if you want to say something first, Kayla?
No, I think Linda Diane captured the essence of what this was intended for, just to be a helpful guidance. And also, It will vary. Like, we had a conversation today in the traffic calming task force of what is their end product going to look like. And so far, things are going well, as Councilmember Ackerman mentioned, and as Bradley also mentioned, that I think we're getting to some consensus agreement between the task force and the staff, where their end result may just be a motion to support the traffic calming program update as presented. So it won't always, I just want to clarify, because we just had that conversation earlier today, that there won't always need to be a report, like a detailed report, I don't think, out of the committee work that involve recommendations. But in the case where you do, this will help give some guidance and point you in the right direction. That's what it's intended to be anyways.
Great. Does our council representative have anything to say about this?
I think it's fantastic. I think it's also something that could be introduced to other commissions. I know we have some that are more verbose than others, but perhaps as part of orientation or even as part of the Citizens Academy. How do you best communicate with a body of people who have to deal with 1,000 issues at once?
I would speak for Kayla to say that we would both love that. Be happy to share it. Any other comments?
Thank you.
Okay, we'll have it around then. Good. And we'll, the intention then is to hand it over to whoever is facilitating each committee or task force that we set up so that they can remember. These things get easily lost. Okay then. Then I think they're ready to go to staff report and updates. And we'll have a shorter meeting tonight. We have a smaller audience as well, so.
One of the main actors of it.
Yeah. So we have transportation project updates.
Yes, Madam Chair, Raymond Hess. I'll go ahead and present this one.
Yes.
I think I mentioned last time that at the last meeting that I moved out here from the Southwest, and I'm quickly reminded from my time in Indiana how the summer presents kind of the mad dash to do as many projects as possible, because I was kind of impressed comparing last month's report to this month's report, how many things have changed and how many things are going on. So I'll quickly go through and highlight those that have a little bit of motion on them, or a lot of motion for that matter. So under the first one, the annual street resurfacing project, Jackson is now complete, and Stone School and State Street have begun. Under Scio Church, that construction just started last week as well. Moving along down towards the bottom of the first page, 7th Street improvements. There's a lot of discussion, some new language is added about advisory bike lanes at the intersections of Scio and Stadium, and so those are going to be incorporated into that project. The other thing to note on 7th Street, you have a handout in front of you, a little orange Halloween advertisement. No, it's not Halloween. It's we are going to be conducting a open house for the north section of 7th Street, north of Huron. And so we're having 3 different work sessions on next week on the 25th to coincide with the Civic Band out there at the park. And then on August 1st to coincide with the farmers market. So those both are pop-up events. And then we'll also have something at City Hall in kind of a closed door atmosphere. So we're interested in trying to figure out what the community support is for several different design concepts that are being developed in-house, and what effect that might have on on-street parking, as well as bicycle facilities. So we're going to kind of float those out there on those dates. North Maple Road is now complete. That just finished last month. And we're going to continue to just monitor how well it's operating, because, as you know, this went on a road diet from 2 lanes in each direction to 1 lane in each direction with the center running turn lane. Let's see. Jumping ahead to, I think it's page 4, the Ellsworth Research Park Drive intersection. We looked at that, and that does meet traffic signal warrants, and so we're currently working with the RIDE on how to best design that and make accommodations for pedestrian crossings at Ellsworth and Research Park Drive. Jackson Avenue Crosswalk. We got an answer from Michigan Department of Transportation that we didn't find satisfactory. They did not support a crossing across their facility over there by Weber's Inn. And so we're currently trying to figure out some resolution to change their mind. And so we've provided them with some rationale as to why we think that crossing is important, and we're in ongoing discussions and negotiations with them over that. Jumping ahead to page 5, on the Ann Arbor STEAM Safe Routes to School project, there was a meeting on June 26th where we met with the neighborhood and heard from some of the recommendations from that Safe Routes to School process and some of the recommendations for improvements out there. There is feedback that we heard from the residents, and a summary can be found on the project website that's linked to that report. On the Ann Arbor Station, under other updates and information, which is I think on page 6, just to let you know, Mr. Eli Cooper is project manager on that, and we have the archaeological investigation contract is being finalized right now, and that work will kind of move forward. That's a piece that's important for the environmental assessment process that's required by Federal Railroad Administration. The next one under that is driver behavior study. This might be some sad news on the report, but we're currently kind of reaching the end of that process in terms of what the budget could support. So the research team had one additional data collection effort that was completed last week. They're going to finalize all the data where it's at. Currently, the pedestrian yield rate is at about 65%. So while there's still a lot of room for improvement, this also marks a great improvement from where, as I understand it, we started from. So, so not to say that our work is done, there's still a lot of work in front of us, but it's something for us to continue to pursue. And under the traffic program submittals, I think many of you are tuned into some of the discussions related to Blewett. From Nixon to Yellowstone. Currently where we're at in that process is we're moving into what we call the optional step 10 survey. Just the way the structure of the process is now, we got a lot of feedback on some of the proposals for that area, but they weren't unanimously accepted by the neighborhood. So now we're trying to figure out what that compromise solution is through this survey mechanism. And then lastly, on the transportation plan update, similar to the railroad update, we are currently in negotiations with a firm to conduct that study. And I think did that already go to council, Eli? No, it's going to council soon. So we're finalizing that scope and contract before taking it to council. So those are the highlights. Those are the big things that have changed from last month to this month. I'm sure you miss Crescent and his report. I'm a poor substitute, but you're stuck with me from now on, I guess. He's given me his Bible, his big blue binder. So he said, yeah, he's been entrusted me with it. So
you did fine. Any questions, comments?
So Raymond, you'll get used to me always talking at this point, and usually it's critical and negative. But I want to let you know that this was the first time I've made it through that document, and this is when I got the news about 7th, and I smiled. And I just want to say thank you, staff, for taking that time and all the meetings with neighbors and with other folks. That I like this compromise at this point, I guess we can call it, and look forward to keep moving that needle forward. So, thanks.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? All right. Thank you very much. And we will move on to the next item, which is an ordinance change. And Kayla, I don't know what you wanted to just let us know. Is that all? Yep. Okay. So you've been informed?
I think Raymond.
All right. Thank you, Madam Chair. So my understanding is this is largely perfunctory. I think many of you are aware, and I may have mentioned it last month, that there's been a bit of a reorganization of some of the different transportation functions here at the city. And so I will be overseeing I'm going to be overseeing some of the folks who were in the traffic engineering, well, they're in the engineering department, traffic engineers. The transportation project manager, Mr. Eli Cooper, is coming over from systems planning over. And then the signs and signals crew are coming over from public works. And so what my understanding is, the idea is to kind of centralize a lot of these transportation functions so that we can kind of move things through a little bit more seamlessly. As a result, one of the things, the original construct of the Transportation Commission had representation from both the engineering department as well as systems planning, but since all of those folks are kind of on the same team now, to just have one representative, and that'd be myself or my designee, to sit in that space. So that's the only change that's being proposed as part of this revision.
One slight clarification, that is one change that's being proposed in the ordinance revision. The other is to remove the reference to Chapter 85, the Taxi Cab Board, because that's no longer the way that taxi cabs are regulated. They're regulated at the state level. So that change was made after our ordinance to establish this commission. So that's striking that language. Yes, Councilmember Ackerman.
Will we be striking all of Chapter 85 from the code? It's still in there.
I believe that's the intent. I think all of Chapter 85 is about the regulation of taxi cab.
That's correct.
Or the taxi cab licensing, and the intent is through this ordinance revision that will go to City Council. So this is, I think, planned to come to City Council for first reading at the first meeting in August, and that's where it would move forward to make the change official, but that removing the entire Chapter 85.
Okay.
There is one other slight change that was just to clarify. Our existing ordinance says that we will provide an annual report on let's see, Raymond has it handy, the effectiveness of the city's transportation strategy process, and make recommendations for any changes there too. We've not yet provided that annual report. We've been operating for a little over a year, and so as we were looking at this ordinance revision, it's a good reminder that we should prepare an annual report, but I think the language that's proposed here to simplify that statement, what I think it's really getting at is the activities and actions of the commission is probably a more straightforward way that we can say that and bring it more into line with what we would intend to provide to City Council.
And who would be responsible for creating that report? Would that be you?
That is a good question. It does not say specifically. It says the Transportation Commission.
Okay,
I think we'll need to discuss.
We'll talk about that.
Yeah.
Okay. Great, so now we know that will be brought to City Council. I don't think we need any other further action. Any other discussion? All right, then the other update is on the, that we have materials on the traffic calming update discussion follow-up. So if there's any comments or questions about that particular document.
Yeah, Madam Chair, this was really just some of the things that we heard at the workshop that we had before the last meeting and some of the things we heard at the last commission meeting. Questions that were raised, staff tried to go ahead and put together a response to those and provided it to you all just so you can kind of see, trying to close the loop on that discussion.
Right, and making that public by having it part of our meeting is great. Okay, and then we also have an update on I thought I saw another update.
Yes,
The budget, yes.
Yes, Madam Chair. There was a request, I believe, at a previous commission meeting for kind of a synopsis of how much money is being spent on transportation initiatives. And so there is a memo included in your backup from City Administrator Lazarus on what that breakdown looks like. So you'll see that in fiscal year 18, it amounted to about $25 million. And it's broken up into roads, sidewalks, lighting, signs, pavement markings, lighting replacement maintenance, and electronic speed limit signage. One little kind of footnote to note here is that roads in and of itself may be a little deceiving, that roads may include multimodal aspects, right? So it may include, bicycle lanes, the street diets or road diets, things like that. So it may not just be vehicular road improvements or repaving. It may actually include other bicycle or pedestrian amenities as well. So sometimes it's hard to kind of tease that out into separate categories. So just keep that in mind when you look at those numbers.
Okay. Any questions or comments? Great, then we'll move into liaison reports. Those people who are representing a particular group, do you have any reports to make? I see none. Are there any reports from individual commissioners? Yes.
I just wanted to mention Common Cycle, who some of you know I volunteer with. They secured a location, and Ann Arbor now has a physical bicycle cooperative. They're going to have a grand opening July 29th from 3 to 6 p.m., 416 West Huron. I'm happy if you want to email me, I can give you more details. If you're on Facebook, you can like them on Facebook. It's a really exciting happening. Yeah, glad to see it happen.
Any other commissioners have comments? Yeah.
I just want to note that this week we were joined by the city's new Sustainability and Innovation Manager, an alumni of this body, Ms. Melissa Stultz, has joined the city. We talked a little bit before about cross-discipline efforts, and Miss, you'll be a big part, as we know that active transportation is an important part of a healthy community and a connected community. So we're really pleased to have her as a member of our team.
Great. All right, if there are no other comments, then we can talk about the next agenda. Any ideas that you want to put forth for next agenda or future agendas? You also have an opportunity to contact Kayla and let her know.
I can share what's in the work plan, if that's helpful. The parking, we had tagged the August meeting to have an update from the DDA to continue discussion about parking. Is there still an interest from the commission in discussing parking with the DDA? I think that they had come maybe to an earlier meeting and spoke a little bit about parking. We had someone from Umtree, one of Dr. Sayer's colleagues, Robert Hampshire, I believe it was, and we talked about parking with him, and I think that's what led to this item. Just want to make sure that's still an interest. Yes.
And if that's not of interest, or if this would be of more interest, Scott, weigh in here, but Planning Commission over the course of the year has it in their work plan to assess how we regulate parking citywide in all of our zoning districts. And if that would be a more useful conversation for this commission to be part of, I'm sure Planning Commission would be open to, molding minds.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you. So we can discuss that, but maybe coordinating with Planning Commission would be a more effective way to approach this issue. I believe the work plan also has the Allen Creek berm opening update as targeted agenda item for August. I'll defer to Commissioner Cooper, but I believe that likely will be provided as in the written transportation project updates. I don't think it's at a point where, I see nodding, so I don't think it's at a point where a presentation on that would provide much additional value. So we'll plan to hold that until it's further along in the project. Some other items that have been discussed, Nixon corridor design, that's one that I'll keep working with the project manager for Nixon corridor, but last that we spoke, August sounded like a target date that they thought they may be ready to bring a presentation to the Transportation Commission. And Ann Arbor bike share, we also had noted to follow up in August and see if they were ready, so I will do that. The traffic calming task force may have their recommendations also by next meeting. That was the target. Okay.
All right. Great. And if there's no objections, then I will call our meeting adjourned.
In our next
8:30.
I object continuously. It's because I always want to announce the next meeting.
Oh, yes.
So the next meeting is scheduled for Wednesday, August 15th at 7:00 p.m. in the City Hall Council chambers.
Great.
Okay.
Now we're adjourned. Thank you very much.